Hi, my name is Stewart Lynch, and this is the first in a series of videos that I'm doing showcasing Realm for MongoDB and how you can use it in your SwiftUI apps. For lack of a better description, you can think of Realm as being a replacement for core data. It's not the same and there are many differences, but I hope that by the time I'm finished, you'll understand why it's now my prepared local persistence layer for iOS development. I have many apps in the App Store that are UIKit and use Realm for data persistence. Realm was purchased by MongoDB, and there's also a cloud sync option, but I'll not be covering this at this time in this initial set of videos. I'm going to be focusing on a local Realm data source, and will progressively introduce you to features over the series of videos. I'm not sure how many there will be at this time, but be sure to subscribe to my channel to get notifications of new ones. In the first 3 or 4 videos, I'll be focusing on SwiftUI and the Realm property wrappers. This video is sponsored by AppFigures. AppFigures makes tracking the business side of your apps like downloads and revenue a breeze, while also helping you to grow your downloads with very intuitive tools for App Store optimization and for competitive intelligence. And it's not just the tools. Ariel from AppFigures shares guides, tutorials, and even hosts live streams to teach you how to promote your app. I also recommend checking out his YouTube channel for weekly news about apps. AppFigures helps you spend less time tracking and more time developing. Sign up with my code, Stewart3030, to get 30% off your first 3 months. Links are in the description below. Thanks again to AppFigures for sponsoring this video. This is the first of 2 videos where we'll create the ubiquitous ToDo app, and by the end I hope you'll see how easy it is to add a simple Realm data store to your application. I've broken it up into 2 parts because I want you to be able to take it all in, so make sure that you understand this part 1 before moving on to part 2. I know a ToDo app is a pretty boring thing to do, but there's a reason why people introduce new APIs and topics for development using this sample. And it's because a ToDo app allows you to introduce several concepts in a single app. For this video, we'll learn more about Realm and how Realm objects, along with managed properties marked with the @persisted designation, are used. You'll learn all about the ObservedResults property wrapper for fetching, reading, and updating your models. I love getting your feedback, so tap the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video and leave a comment below. Make sure you subscribe to the video and ring that bell to get notifications of new videos. And if you want to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. First of all, what is Realm? Well, Realm's a mobile database and it's open source, developer-friendly alternative to core data and SQLite. You can start in minutes and port your app in hours and save yourself weeks of work. You can see that it's owned by MongoDB, and since MongoDB took over Realm, there's been an emphasis on cloud syncing, and eventually I might get to that. But for this series, I want to focus on a local Realm storage, and that requires neither an account nor any fees. You can just use it like you would core data, except that you'll have to import the SDK as it's a third-party solution. The link that you'll find in the description below is your best starting point. You'll have links to installing Realm, getting started, and docs. So since we're just starting out, let's go here first. You'll see that there is a pricing tab and a sign-in button. And the good thing is that you are not going to be syncing data to the cloud, so you don't need to worry about any of that. So from here, click on the Realm Database SDK links, and then on the Swift SDK. There's lots of information here, and to be honest, I'm just starting out myself, learning how to implement the latest version of Realm with SwiftUI. So that's what I'm going to focus on. I recommend that you explore the many links on this page, but the most important one for you to bookmark would be this Swift reference manual. I keep coming back to this link for reference and examples. I found that the quick start with SwiftUI to be helpful, but I wouldn't recommend it to you if you're just starting out on your development path. What I'm going to do is to take you through my learning process and hope that'll help you. The one thing on this page that is helpful, though, is the prerequisites. You'll need Xcode 12.4 or higher, you'll need to create a SwiftUI app, and you'll need to install the SDK. So let's start there. Let me dismiss this first screen and start by creating a new application. I'm going to call it Realm-to-dos-1, and I'll make sure that I choose SwiftUI for the interface and the language as Swift. And I'll save it to my desktop, and as always, I'll make sure that I create a Git repository. Let me adjust my screen now and change the simulator to an iPhone 13 Pro. That's my standard. Now I've produced some assets for this application, and you can choose to ignore them if you like. There's no coding involved, but I always like to add a custom icon and launch screen to all of my apps so that they're easily recognizable on the simulator. I use Jordi Bruin's fabulous bakery app to create my app icons. Go to the Assets folder and delete the app icon that you see there. In the Resources folder for this tutorial, which you can download from the link in the description below, you'll see the app icon folder, so you can simply drag it into your Assets folder as a replacement. Similarly, for the launch screen, I have a PNG image that I can drag into the folder. I'm going to go to the inspector and change the scale to single scale. And then, instead of using the plist version of the launch screen, I prefer the old storyboard approach as I find it more reliable. So I'll create a new file and then search for and add a launch screen storyboard. Let me delete that label that's there. Then I can click on the plus button and drag and drop that launch screen image onto the canvas. Next, I can add two constraints. So I'll click on the image, and then I'll add horizontally in container and vertically in container. Let me expand the screen now and do one more thing. I'll select the application target, and then choose the launch screen as the launch screen file. If you run your app now, you'll see that the launch screen appears on launch. And if you return to your home screen, you'll see that nice new icon. Next up now, we'll need to add the Realm SDK before we get started. So let's return to the Realm website and click on the Install Swift SDK link. You see that you can install it via Swift Package Manager, CocoaPods, or Carthage, and I always prefer Swift Package Manager. So all I need to do is to copy this SDK URL from here, and then I can return to my project, and then from the File menu I can choose Add Package and paste in the URL. I can click on the Add Package and wait for the package to download. Now, this may take a while, so just be patient. Eventually, once it's been fetched, you'll see this screen where you can select both Realm and Realm Swift, and then click on Add Package. Now, because I'm building this app as I record this series, what you'll see me doing in this video is actually the second go-round. So first, I want to commit where I am right now so that I can test out the next section, and then I can roll back to this commit to duplicate the process when recording. You won't see me making commits in this video anymore, but be assured I do it on a regular basis. The first thing that we'll need to do is to create a folder to contain our model. So create a new group folder called Models. Within that folder, create a new Swift file and call it ToDo. For local Realm databases, you can define your object models directly in code. For that, we'll need to import Realm Swift. Next, create a class that conforms to the private Realm Swift object protocol, and there's a public type alias for that, so you can just use object. Now, when you declare property attributes of a class, you can specify whether or not those properties should be managed by Realm, and managed properties are stored or updated in the database. Conversely, ignored properties are not stored to the database. So to mark a property to be stored by Realm, we use the @persisted. And for those of you who, like me, are coming from previous versions of Realm, this replaces the old @object_c dynamic. So let's start by creating one for name, which is going to be a string. and one for completed, which is a Boolean that will initialize as false. Now, do you notice anything strange here? The class isn't complaining, which, as normally, if there was no @persisted, because we have not provided a default value for our name, and it complains that it needs initialized. Well, it turns out that by making a property as persisted, it'll guarantee a default value, and that will change depending on the type. For the life of me, I can't find out that information now about what the defaults are, but I have come across it before, so if I come across it again, I'll leave a link in the description below. If you're unsure, you can always set a default value like I did here for completed. Realm supports the following property types, and I'll be using many of these in this series of videos. And you can see it also supports optionals. Now, you should always create a primary key for each of your models, and this will allow you to efficiently find, update, and upsert objects. And upserting, that term means that it'll either insert or update an object depending on whether or not the object already exists. Upserting requires that the data model have a primary key, like we're doing. Now, you can only have one primary property in a model, and in order to generate a unique primary key, you can use the object ID, and this will create a random unique object. So to do this, you'll need to create a persisted property, but with the argument primary key being true. The default is obviously false, so it doesn't need to be specified. Since we're going to be creating a list of to-dos, we'll want to make this class conform to the identifiable protocol. And since we have an object key for our ID value, we can use the Realm object key identifiable protocol. And we can see that that does conform to the identifiable protocol as well. I want to create one more property for my class, and that's an enum. That will be one that I can call urgency. And that's going to be an int with 3 cases: trivial, neutral, and urgent. And I'm making them an int because I want to be able to eventually sort based on urgency. So the default raw values then will be 0, 1, and 2. But I do, however, want to display a string equivalent too. So I'll create a computed text property for that enum and switch on self. And I'll return an equivalent string value for each of my different enums. Next, I want to be able to use that enum as a property for my class and default it to neutral. And Realm supports enums if you conform them to the persistable enum protocol. And this requires that the enum have a raw value, and ours does because we specified it to be an int, and that raw value must be a type that Realm can store, which it can. So the enum also has to be explicitly marked as conforming to this protocol, as Swift doesn't let us do that implicitly. So now I can create that property called urgency, and we can specify it as of type urgency and set the value to neutral. So it'll store a 1 by default. Now there's one last thing I want to do because there is no initializer. We can create a convenience initializer to make the creation of our to-dos easier when we write our code. And since we have default values for completed being false and neutral for urgency, all we really need is to know the name. And a convenience initializer will allow us to set a name as an argument. We call the self-init, and then we can assign that self.name to that name that was passed in. Let's switch now to our content view to design our list view for our list of to-dos. Now instead of content view, I want to refactor and rename that to be to-do list view. Since we'll be using Realm, let's import Realm. Like Core Data and now Firebase, Realm has introduced a property wrapper for SwiftUI that's called ObservedResults. And if you specify a type of object that you want to fetch, you can fetch and observe changes on that model and respond accordingly. And this is like an observed object, but for Realm. So we'll specify the model type using self and assign it to a variable called ToDos. In the body of our view, then, let's start with a navigation view. Inside there, I'm going to create a VStack, and then within there, I'm going to create a list that will iterate through using for each one of our to-dos, using that for each loop. And that'll provide us with an instance of a to-do as the iterator. And for now, we'll simply provide a text view using the to-dos name property. This seems to break the preview, and I can't honestly get that to work. So I'm just going to dismiss that canvas for now. And I'm going to have to check my updates in the simulator. Let's set the list row separator to be hidden. And then on the list, I'm going to set the list style to be plain. I want to add a navigation title to be Realm To-Dos. Now we're going to need some way to add new to-dos, so I'm going to create a text field above the list, and that's why I created a VStack. And this is going to require a state property that we'll call name and initialize it as an empty string. I'll create an HStack then as the first item in that VStack using a text field with the string protocol being new to do, and I'll bind the text to our new name property. I'll set the text field style to rounded border. And then I'm going to add a spacer so that I can push a button to the right. And for that button, we're going to create a label that has a system image. And that system image is just going to be a plus.circle.fill. I also don't want to have people adding empty to-dos, so I'm going to disable it if our name is empty. For the action, we can create a new to-do using our convenience initializer, passing in that name. And then we can simply append that new to-do to our observed result, and then reset our name back to an empty string. It's that simple. We're almost ready to test. First, though, I want to be able to dismiss the keyboard when we enter a new value. Otherwise, the keyboard is going to be stuck in that open mode. So I'm going to create a new focus state property that I'll call focus, and I'll just make it an optional Boolean. And then I can mark our text field as being focused when it's entered by setting the state of our focus property to true. Then after we've tapped on our button, we can set it back to nil, and that will dismiss the keyboard. One final thing, we'll add some padding to this HStack. Well, it's time to test. So, as I said, I'm going to have to run this on the simulator, and I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of to-dos. And you can see that the button disabled until I start entering some text. And when I press on enter, the keyboard dismisses. Let me enter a second one. Now, did it persist? Let me stop and then run again. And indeed, my data had persisted. This is fantastically simple. But it gets even better. We can now create, store, and retrieve our to-dos from our Realm database. What we'll need to do next is to provide operations to update and delete objects. And also Realm provides us with a nice application called Realm Studio that lets us view and modify the Realm data store. So in the next video, we'll finish this app up by adding our additional properties to the row and adding those remaining CRUD operations as well, and also introduce you to another property wrapper, as well as sorting and filtering the list. So take some time before the next video to review the Realm documentation, and I'll see you in the next video.